Hi, welcome back to Broken and Brilliant. I'm Carrie O'Toole with Carrie O'Toole Ministries. I have an amazing guest today. I'm so excited to welcome Elisa Morgan. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here, Carrie. Thanks for inviting me.
You are so welcome. Turns out we're kind of neighbors.
Yeah, we kind of are. We live, maybe 5-10 miles apart?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. And so I've known about you for years, going back to my days as a mom in MOPS, which is Mothers of Preschoolers. Can you share just a little bit about the vision and the focus of MOPS?
Yeah, MOPS started in 1973-ish, around there, really to minister to moms who have babies, like in utero all the way into kindergarten. And that's awesome. It's just an awesome need. It's a time when moms feel like they're doing everything wrong and wondering how God could possibly trust them with a child. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying. Do you know God gives babies, children, to people every time who've never been parents before? I don't know what he's thinking, but that's what he does.
Very true. And there's no license or training or whatever, and we're just kind of thrust into this, and here you go. So that's where I ended up. We had adopted our oldest son and then had our daughter 15 months later, and so here I was, a mom of two that were only 15 months apart, just struggling through, trying to figure it out, and I wound up in a MOPS group.
Yeah, MOPS.org. So if people are watching, that's where you can find a local group. There's some 4,000 in the U.S. and all around the globe.
Right. So you were actually the CEO.
I was.
Of
MOPS was grassroots for 15 years and functioned just with volunteers. And then the board decided it was time to formalize the leadership and went looking. And honestly, when that opportunity came to me, I was like, me? Are you kidding, God? I mean, I am Mother Elisa, not Mother Teresa. Ridley. And I mean, I truly had to double up my therapy sessions and figure out, really, God, do you want me to apply for this? And I was in the grocery store, and I felt him kind of nudging me to look around at the other moms, and they had the same messes in their lives I did. And, he just gently said, Elisa, give me your deficits, and I'll make them your offering. And I did, and I applied, and for 20 years I served in that role, and others have since. But it was a great impact and a great place to plant and grow.
Yeah. Well, that's where I heard about you. So I knew you as Mother Teresa.
Okay, well, I deluded you.
Just being honest here. So your name came up through a mutual friend. That's how this podcast came to be. I contacted you and I'm thinking, oh, cool, we'll have this awesome, amazing woman on. And absolutely true. And then I started reading your books. Yeah. And I was like, oh, thank God.
I know, just as big a mess up as everybody, yeah.
Yeah, because, my life's not been so perfect. And that's most of the people that we're talking to here, theirs are not either. I don't appeal to the perfect.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is perfect, but we sure spend a lot of time pretending.
Yeah,
like
we do. Yeah, we do. So you have a new book that came out that we'll talk about on the next podcast, but I really started going back and looking at the one that you published. Was it 2 years ago?
In 2013.
13. Okay, so this is called The Beauty of Broken. There's no such thing as a perfect family. I loved this book. I just loved it. And it really was very, very vulnerable. And you've been through, I was just looking at the front. Okay, addiction, adoption, name them.
You name it, really. In fact, often when I speak on this topic, I start out with a list of questions. Are you a child of a single mom? Has someone in your family chosen abortion? Has someone chosen adoption? Are you the parent of a young girl who became pregnant as a teenager and then a second time? Is someone in your family gay? Is somebody in your family addicted to alcohol? Is somebody in your family addicted to drugs? Has someone in your family been arrested and you got a eerie middle of the night phone call? Blah, 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 blah. And I do this, and I don't let people actually raise their hands because it's way too embarrassing.
Right.
But just if they can inside say yes, I say yes. We do that quietly to ourselves, and then I've said yes to every single question. And I didn't choose it, but this is the reality of what's happened in my life. So I come from a broken family, broken through divorce and alcoholism and a lot of other stuff. And so I decided it was my responsibility to create a perfectly intact second family.
Right.
But the reality is that despite my very best efforts, I still come from a broken family. My second family fell and broke.
And there's nobody who doesn't come from. That's a double negative, but
that works.
We all come from broken families, and we all are in broken families right now because we're all broken people. Can you talk, what is broken?
Yeah.
What does that mean to you?
Well, if you look at it, in sociological senses, it's broken by the people in an original family not living together, or you could be broken financially, in terms of broke family, or you can be broken spiritually and really divorced from God. There are a lot of ways to be broken, but just as you said, Carrie, I mean, we all come from broken families because God's family, the very first family, became a broken family.
Right.
The very first family is a family that was divorced from God's heart. And in the space of the first 6 chapters of the book of Genesis, you've got, Eve giving birth to the first child ever, and this one brother murders the other one.
Right.
And it's wackadoodle.
The first 2 siblings ever.
Yeah. Ever. And it keeps on going, and so God just graciously decides to start over, and pretty much right after Noah, it gets all bad again. And that in the Old Testament, you see a king sleeping and having adultery with another woman, and ends up having another king of Israel. Crazy stuff. Until finally the New Testament starts off with a unwed pregnant teenager. I mean, it's pretty awesome stuff. So my point is, I accepted this responsibility that God really never assigned to me to create a perfectly intact second family. I'm going to end up creating a second broken family because I'm broken. We all are. And you know what? Honestly, if God, who's the perfect parent, ends up with broken kids, why do we think we can do it any better?
Right. Well, so I loved your vulnerability in this book. And I liked how at the beginning of it you talked about even the insecurity of putting it out there.
What was that? Vomit in the back of my throat. Yeah.
So here you are, CEO of MOPS, and this stuff is going on.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that? What was it like? To me, I really want to know about what was it like feeling like there were just parts you could not share?
There's a reality that when we break and when our relationships break and our families break, we do have to do our work to process that breakage. And as I did my work through a lot of counseling, a lot of prayer, a lot of help, I realized that the story wasn't just my story to tell. The story belonged to my daughter and my son and my husband and then my daughter's children as well. And as I carried that, I realized I could tell my story, but I wasn't free to tell their story. So I actually didn't tell their story publicly for about 10 to 15 years. The board of MOPS International knew what was going on in our home. What happened is that my daughter became pregnant as a teenager, and then my son began to lose himself in alcohol. Those are the 2 quote, big things. There were millions of other things, but I realized that I needed to have accountability, and so my board helped with that, and our senior leadership knew, but I couldn't talk publicly about it because it wasn't just my story. And I think there's times to put duct tape over our mouth and say, this needs to sit for a while, and I need to do my work, which is hard and expensive. And yes, Carrie, humiliating. And I carried around shame enough from my first family, just feeling like if I was enough, my dad wouldn't have divorced my mother. If I was enough, my mother wouldn't have drunk too much alcohol. But in my second family, if I was enough, my daughter might not have made some of her choices, nor my son. So I had to do a lot of work on shame.
What do you mean by that, do a lot of work? I have a degree in counseling. I work as a life coach, and a lot of people talk about, what does that even mean? You hear people talk about to do your work. For you, what did it look like?
Yeah, for me, it looked like going to counseling, accepting the assignments my counselor gave me. But more than that, it looked like owning my own stuff. Here I was sandwiched, honestly, between 2 generations, my parents and my children, who'd made choices different than I made. And I struggled so much that I finally had to look at myself and realize I too messed up. I have a huge sin, and it's called pride. That I have control, that I can create some perfect little life. I can't. I'm selfish, I'm arrogant, I'm impatient, I make wrong decisions, I'll swoop into places where God hasn't asked me to be. It's like I decided that I needed to save my children for the very things that helped me understand my own need for Christ. we do that as parents. We want to give
Yes.
them better. But to do my own work meant to look at my own stuff and then to get around on the other side of it and look at it the way God looks at it, which is, when I understand this, forgiven. And it means learning to love myself the way He does. This is long stuff. I've been at this a long time,
Right.
a couple of decades trying
Right.
to figure this out.
Right. It's not like you go to counseling 3 times and figure out your life. You mentioned that it's painful and it's expensive to do your work. And I'm sure you mean financially, partially, but how else is it expensive?
It's expensive because I have to give up the things, the defenses, the elements I put in place to survive. Control is really important when you're an adult child of alcoholism. That's how you learn to survive. Well, if
Right. nobody's
nobody's going to be at home when I get home after school, I have to figure out how to take care of myself. I have to clean the house. I have to get a job. I have to take care of myself. So, yay! I'm super resilient and self-reliant and industrious and tenacious and creative. But I'm also can be insulated and afraid of intimacy and unwilling to connect and stubbornly defensive. So that's the expensive part. When you lay down those things that you depended upon to survive, you leave yourself wonky, vulnerable,
Right.
open to a lot of pain.
Right.
That's expensive.
Right. Absolutely. You mentioned shame. How does shame fit into all of that?
You
In
know,
in a 2-minute
in a
sound
2 minute
bite.
sound.
No, I'm just kidding.
I understand, though. We want quick answers. We do. I think children usually overfunction regarding their parents' choices. Often when I'm speaking, I'll say that the breakage in my original family wasn't my fault. I
Right.
mean, children are not responsible to make sure that their parents stay married.
Right.
Children are not responsible to make sure their parents don't overdrink. Children are not responsible to make sure that adults don't put their hands in places on a child's body that are inappropriate and violating. Children are not responsible for the breakage in their first family. But we take on that responsibility and think, oh, that's mine. I better fix it. And if I can't fix it, I feel like a failure. Then when we apply that and we grow up and we're big girls and boys and we realize, gee, I did kind of become monster mom in this situation, or I wasn't Jesus perfect in this situation. That kind of expansive, blow it out of proportion emotion of I should have done better can be guilt, an appropriate kind of responsibility gone exponential,
Right.
which is shame.
Right.
Too much.
Right.
Doesn't fit.
So for you, how did you deal with the shame and finally overcome that? Because I've seen where it can be debilitating.
It is.
How did you
I don't
finally?
think shame is ever helpful. Can I just say that?
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever a helpful, ever emotion. I love 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 10. Paul writes, godly sorrow leads to repentance, which leads to salvation and leaves no regret. There's a beautiful process of being convicted of guilt, being sorry, and then being freed without regret. But worldly sorrow leads to death.
Right.
Worldly sorrow is shame. It leads to death. That's the only place it can go. It's down a drain. It's into a garage with a motor on in a car. It just leads you to no help, no way out. And I think, honestly, the evil one hisses all day and night that we need to carry around shame, which is, his invention. God calls us up to his presence and says, you don't need to worry about this. I got this.
Right. Right. That was pretty good. 2 minutes for something that could be a doctoral dissertation.
It
or
has
10.
been. There's some beautiful experts finally writing on the topic,
Yes.
like Brene Brown and
Right.
others, and Aubrey Sampson just has a new book out.
I know Aubrey
yes,
Sampson.
Aubrey. That's
Yes.
it. I
yes.
endorsed it. Got to get her name.
Did you?
Anyway.
Yeah. She was in a blast program that I did with Shannon Etheridge. So
That's right.
we're
Shannon
out
writes a
of
lot
it.
of
Yes.
it too.
Yes.
You're in the same.
Yeah.
It's the same club.
I haven't read Aubrey's yet. Aubrey, I'm going to read yours.
You should have her on this program.
Yes, I should.
She's very cool.
That would be great. And it's funny because even as we talk about that word should can be so shame-filled for so many people. I just was at the SCORE conference with Ken Davis a couple weeks ago, and they force you in your planning a talk or how you're writing to use the word should. And he said, if you were raised in a home where it was, you should. Yes. You can really have a negative reaction to that. And then he talked about a cabin that he owns, and he was describing it, and he's like, the wildlife and the peace and the quiet and the mountains. You should come.
Oh.
There's a different way to use that word. I don't know why I thought of that. But anyway, while we're talking about that, because that word should can be so negative. Could we talk just for a few minutes about adoption and your experience with adoption, and just what are your views on adoption? What do you say to people who are wanting to adopt, people who have adopted, people who are adopted?
There's no doubt that adoption is one of the most beautiful gifts we can experience on this planet. I mean, God uses the metaphor of adoption when he talks about us coming into his family. We don't quote belong. We were born of him, but it's weird, how we now fit in his family. But adoption's also gnarly. And I remember trying to talk about this when we were applying to adopt. And my husband and I knew that we were going to be unable to have children biologically. And began this long, arduous process of adopting. And, you think, well, I'm just going to have a little mini me, and I'm going to, create this perfect little life for this child. And God warned me, truly, in the weeks, actually years, prior to ever receiving our first child. By the time you receive him or her, I felt God's nudge. He or she will already have experienced the greatest wound of his or her life. And to me, that meant the severing of a biological bond with two parents. The adoption agencies during this time, 30 years ago, poo-pooed that.
Well, and still do, to a large degree.
Don't use that word negative. Don't talk about the
Don't talk about trauma. Don't talk about attachment, rejection, all those things.
And I don't want to say that every adopted child always goes through that particular processing of their reality, but many do. And I really do believe there is a kind of a primal wound that happens inside a soul. So both of my children are adopted. Evan and I adopted them as babies. Eva was 3 weeks old. My son was 13 days old. My firstborn grandson was relinquished in adoption. Right. So I sit sandwiched again, between adopting and relinquishing. And he's a fantastic kid, and he's figuring his way out and his way through this life. But I also look at that, and I know the most loving decision my daughter could have made is the one that she made. And I think he's trying to understand that and is making his own journey. But what, we want to tie it up in this neat bow and make it all shiny and sparkly, and it's a little bit more messy.
Yes, it is.
Just like regular kids are.
Yeah. Because they are regular kids, and everybody has their trauma at some point or another, and that's the issue with adoption sometimes is, especially in the churches, is we don't talk about that piece of it.
The trauma.
And it's made to be such a wonderful thing, which, like you said, it is. But a lot of times people aren't getting the training that they need. They do not understand that sometimes, especially when the attachment wounds go even deeper into a disorder of some kind, the parenting is going to look very different. And bringing those kids into the family, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And a lot of people don't want to look at that. And you use the word relinquishment, which is the title of my book. So I connected with you, and I had no idea when we were talking about doing this interview, I had no idea that you had any ties with adoption, with attachment issues, with all the things that go along with that. So I just felt very drawn to you, and I know that a lot of the people who are watching this will as well. And I'm trying to think how to wrap this up neatly, because like you said, you cannot wrap this kind of stuff up into a neat little bow.
Well, on the other title for The Beauty of Broken is my story, and likely yours too. And maybe that's the wrap, is that We think we're supposed to do this life all alone and do it perfectly. And we are so ashamed and we hide our brokenness and we think we're the only ones. You know, we punch down our garage doors or go into our apartments and close the door and, you know, we imagine everybody's having Bible study in there. Well, they're not. You know, they're watching The Bachelorette just like you are. I mean, that's really what they're doing. And so I think for me, Carrie, is to honestly say, I don't know what I'm doing either. I'm clinging as hard as I can to the hope that I have in my relationship with Christ. And we need each other. So let's come on out and share what's really going on so that we can share the hope.
And what has been the response to the book?
Every time I'm so, when I start to talk, every time I think I'm the only one, and people have this awkward silence when they're getting up and grabbing their purses and their bulletins and walking out, and they go, "Nope, that's me too."
Get rid of the freaky lady here.
but they're like, "That's my story too." I'm so relieved.
Do you just see the fresh air and the
Exactly.
breathing just relax when they realize you're not trying to come in and tell them how perfect
And
your life is?
they're not the only ones.
Yeah.
They're so relieved. We all are when we know we're in this together.
Thank you so much. This is just such a joy and a pleasure. I really am so blessed to have you here today. We're going to come back again and do another podcast in just a minute on your newer book, which is called
Hello, Beautiful. Seeing yourself as God sees you. Yeah.
I love that. So we're going to come back and talk about Hello, Beautiful in just a few minutes. But for right now, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time here on Broken and Brilliant.